Coming up next on Arizona Horizon's Journalists Roundtable, a new poll this week shows Hillary Clinton with a 5-point lead over Donald Trump in Arizona. That same poll shows Senator John McCain up by double digits over challenger Representative Ann Kirkpatrick. The Journalists Roundtable is next on Arizona Horizon.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome to Arizona Horizon's Journalists Roundtable. I'm Ted Simons. Joining us tonight, Aaliyah Rao of the Arizona Republic, Howard Fisher of Capital Media Services, and Steve Goldstein of KJZZ Radio. A new poll released this week shows Hillary Clinton leading Donald Trump by 5 points in Arizona. That's the biggest margin to date here. Is this at all a surprise?
Not so much. I mean, the poll was done right after the video came out. You know, there was a lot of stuff after that second debate, so there was a lot of stuff going on with Trump. But yeah, I mean, it's a growing number so far.
And yeah, we're seeing now the 43.3, Donald Trump 37.8, Gary Johnson 6.5%, now Jill Stein 4%, only 8% undecided. I mean, people pretty much have figured this one out, haven't they?
I don't know. It still seems like there's a lot of people who are even, you know, if they say they'll support one, I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of people who might sit this one out.
What do you think, Hallie?
I think that there's a certain gag reflex to this election. I don't know how else to express it. There are people, look, if Donald Trump were running against anyone else, he would have lost. If Hillary Clinton were running against anyone else, you know, it would be a different election. The negatives on these people, and some of the polling has showed that, is just so high that there are folks who say, there are probably people who are going to go, as Aaliyah said, right at the last minute and say, okay, I've got this ballot here. I need to do something with it. What am I going to do?
Republicans are in every single statewide office in Arizona. Not a Democrat among them. Democratic presidential candidate leading by 5 points in the latest poll. That surprised you?
It is Donald Trump. It's the Donald Trump effect. And I think what also is funny is that Gary Johnson, I think for a while some of us thought maybe he could get 10, 11, 12% maybe. I think the more we hear about Trump and the more offended certain people are by Trump, they're thinking, boy, I really think this is kind of important to vote for Hillary Clinton rather than voting for Johnson, who's not going to win, obviously.
Well, the other piece of it is Johnson's done himself no favor. When he was asked about Aleppo, he says, what's an Aleppo? You know, you got to have something to pull some votes away. The only candidate, curiously enough, who might do well, there's a write-in here, but is on the ballot in Utah, is Evan McMullin. And what's fascinating about that is he could put Utah into Hillary's category, or at least or he possibly win himself, either way, taking it away from Trump.
Yes,
and
Evan
that
McMullin
affects the whole electoral.
He's an LDS candidate, conservative, former CIA, and he is running neck and neck and neck with Trump and with Clinton. High-profile appearances by Democrats this week in Arizona. I mean, we saw First Lady Michelle Obama and others.
We had the trifecta. We had Bernie, we had Obama, we had Chelsea Clinton, and everyone kind of hit their demographic. Chelsea was with the students. You know, everybody kind of really focused on the areas. We haven't seen Hillary. We'll see what happens with that.
You think we might see her?
Well, I don't know if you had heard, apparently Bill Clinton on Halloween, the year he won Arizona, was here. So there's a big push to get Hillary here on Halloween. It's kind of a good luck charm. So we'll see if the request from the Arizona Democrats plays out.
And look, the party is feeling really cocky about the election. I mean, talking about even potentially upsetting McCain, which I don't think will happen, we'll talk about in a minute. But they're saying, look, we have a chance to do something that hasn't been done since Clinton, and since then before to Harry Truman. And they are just feeling fat and happy, and if they could pull off Arizona, the Goldwater state, by bringing Hillary here on October 31st, they're going to do it.
I think one thing we've seen, though, which I find interesting, is it's hard to look at who's attending the rallies and think that means something. Obviously, Bernie Sanders, the rallies were incredible, and he did quite well in the primary season, but not well enough. And yet his crowds were much more excited than Hillary Clinton's were. Donald Trump attracted large crowds, too. Everyone wants to see Michelle Obama, of course. Does that translate to getting these young people to the polls? We don't know that yet.
Well, that's the thing, the get out the vote. It's the same thing with the Hispanic vote and the questions there. In fact, is just today, former Governor Jan Brewer was making some offhand comments, which is a lot of what Jan Brewer does, to the Boston Globe, said, well, you know, Hispanics, they don't vote at all. Now, if I am the head of the Latino community, I take that headline and I run with it to every Latino polling place and say, prove her wrong.
And yet, this election, you've got Donald Trump and you've got Joe Arpaio both on the ballot. Will we see that Latino vote that we always, not always, but often expect to see and doesn't seem to show up?
I don't think we're going to know until Election Day on that one, or after Election Day. I mean, they've said in prior years, after 1070, against Jan Brewer, against Arpaio, in prior election and prior election and prior election, that they would kind of show up. I don't know if Trump is the one who's going to get them out there. I think that's going to be to be determined.
Early ballots so far indicate the Democrats are returning those ballots at a faster rate than they have in the past here in Arizona. Usually Republicans do very well in that category. So that may be something where we're seeing that extra enthusiasm, and nothing's going to change my mind. Obviously, I'm going to vote for Clinton over Trump. Maybe people are saying that. So that could have an impact. If you see more people and you see the momentum shifting that way, people like a winner.
But is that just Republicans saying, I still don't know what to do about Trump, and being a little more slow this year at turning in their early ballot?
Or is it that they don't want to vote for Trump, they're pretty sure about McCain, and they're not sure about anything else?
Yeah, well, speaking of McCain, same survey, Arizona Republic, Morrison Institute, Cronkite News poll, showing McCain with a double-digit lead over Ann Kirkpatrick, and we're talking 11.5 points here. And if there were ever a time you would think John McCain would be vulnerable, this would be that time. This poll suggests not so.
Well, there's a whole bunch of factors there. Number one, the Democrats did not exactly choose a candidate with a lot of presence, pizzazz. I mean, you had them here in the studio. And this was a woman who had an opportunity over the course of an hour to shine, to come out with something, and it was flat. I don't know how else to do her presentation. Number two is that McCain finally, after being beaten about the head and ears, finally did distance himself from Trump, and I think that will help him. If he hadn't, I think that we'd be seeing different numbers. And number three is that Kirkpatrick is not well known outside the district. Again, you need money. McCain has twice as much money as she has a name ID. This is fine if you're in Payson and I know who Ann Kirkpatrick is. If you're in Yuma, not so much.
When we dug down into the poll, there were a lot of people who just said, I don't know anything about Kirkpatrick. She doesn't have the name recognition like Howie said. People just don't know. We've seen the ad with the cowboy boots. But is that resonating, and what else do they know about her? Do they know enough to vote about?
So basically, she is not succeeding in getting that message out there. That's the bottom line here.
Not getting her name out and not getting her story out, correct?
And that's particularly true. Again, the cowboy boots, that goes so far. And meanwhile, McCain and his allies have beat her up over walking out years ago on that meeting. She has a different story behind it. Her backing of Obamacare, even as we're facing 50 and 75% increases in the rates being charged here, she's getting tarred pretty well.
Ted, I don't want to jump ahead because we'll talk about Arpaio in a moment, but we look at Trump, McCain, and Arpaio, and these three are individuals. I think McCain's Q rating is almost as high as Trump's. And in Arizona, who doesn't know John McCain? So I almost feel like they're separate animals, where McCain, yes, is affected by supporting Trump. But it was such tepid support that I think there were enough people who thought, well, he doesn't really mean it, so I'm still going to stick with it.
But what about McCain? And this is obviously after the poll survey was done, the obstructionism regarding the Supreme Court. I mean, could that play a factor in this race?
That did not sound like the maverick, independent-leaning John McCain. So it could, certainly, but we have to see who's on the Judiciary Committee. We don't know if this one, McCain is not someone who would have a vote in this. So the fact that he spouts off, we're not shocked by that.
But you're assuming that the voters really care about a Supreme Court, 8 members versus 9 members versus anything else. People care about the Supreme Court to the extent of, will they overturn Roe versus Wade? But in terms of filling, I don't think they care about him saying he's necessarily going to block, and then he backed off and said, well, not necessarily. I don't think anybody cares.
But most major Republican figures out there are saying that they can't vote for Hillary Clinton for the number one reason is that Supreme Court appointment and future appointments. I mean, even those that are somehow tiptoeing close behind Donald Trump are saying, that's not him, it's that. That's the reason.
Understood. But in terms of that being an issue that harms McCain, that he's not going to support I don't see that in terms of, the people who are calling talk radio, that's not what they're calling about.
What do you think? You agree with that?
I agree. I think it's kind of a complex situation to trickle down to McCain. I mean, I think you're right. If you're looking at Trump and Clinton, sure. if you're looking at McCain, what kind of a role do they have and how would this work and all that. I mean, there's a lot of procedural stuff to kind of complicate things.
All right, Steve, you mentioned Joe Arpaio. We did obviously the same poll, the Republic Morrison Cronkite News poll, talked about Joe Arpaio. And this one raised a lot of eyebrows because we are used to seeing Arpaio. If he's got some trouble, he's winning by about 3 or 4 points. Usually it's 5 or 8, and people are saying, hey, you never know. He is down big time in this poll.
And I talked to one political scientist this week who said to me, I'm surprised because he ultimately thinks because of how much Arpaio has in the war chest, that will make the difference. And yet we're seeing some pretty positive Penzone ads. Arpaio, the fact that they're going ahead with trying to prosecute him for criminal contempt, I think that has turned some people who thought he was the law and order candidate, and they're thinking, well, maybe it is time for him to go.
Well, but see, there's the other side to that. And even Ed Montini talked about this. Does the timing look political? And Joe wears this as a badge of honor. Barack Obama, as his last act in office, wants to get rid of me. Look, I see the numbers up on the screen. I understand what's being said. There's been some positive Penzone ads there, but I have a feeling there are a lot of Arpaio supporters out there who, when they get the call from the Cronkite folks and everyone else, Morrison, say, well, I don't know, but I don't know that, I don't believe that'll be the margin.
Those 3 words are interesting because in this poll, 21% said that they weren't sure.
Yeah, so how many of those people really weren't sure or just don't want to say, like Howie said? Or again, I mean, I could see a Trump effect, though, for him as opposed to McCain, that, you have this solid group of people who maybe just aren't going to vote this election because they don't want to deal with it. I mean, they're not going to vote Penzone, but they don't want to vote Arpaio.
This was still a pretty narrow race last time, about 4 points or so that the sheriff did win by. And that was okay. The regular sheriff controversy, he's costing the county millions of dollars. But Howie, I'm with you, and I understand what you said about the Supreme Court too, but this is a sheriff facing federal indictment. I mean, this is real. This is not something. I think enough people hear those words, and now clearly his base is with him. He's going to get 45 to 49% for sure. It's going to be very tight. But this is one where I definitely don't see him losing by double digits, but he could lose by points.
And I don't know. I mean, let's assume they were to book him right before Election Day, and we get this perp walk. How does that work for him? I mean, I can see him, saying, yeah, I don't know. I have been watching this man's career for almost as many years. I've been sitting around this table, totally amazed. And so,
Have you ever seen a poll with him down by double digits?
I have not. But again, look, he's being hit with a lot of hard stuff, and I'm still waiting for the next round of the anti-Penzone ads, the wife-beating kind of stuff, and that has an effect. Aaliyah pointed out earlier to us that more women are likely to side with Arpaio because they see Penzone as perhaps an abuser.
But does anyone trust Arpaio anymore regarding those ads? Do they just think that this is yet another mud fest that does its half-truths, the whole 9 yards?
And since when does that matter to people?
All right, let's move ahead. Prop 205 was also mentioned in the poll, and we had a debate on Prop 205 just right here last night, and 50% in favor of Prop 205. Did that surprise you?
It does. I mean, there's so much money and effort being put in fighting this proposition. I mean, it's unbelievable, all the different organizations that have kind of come together, and the governor and Montgomery, and everybody is putting a ton of money and a ton of effort into fighting this, and it is not moving that line.
Yeah, I mean, Steve, I see a lot of no on 205s. I don't see much pro 205s, and look at this. I mean, this is 8 some odd points.
I talked to Tom Riley of Morrison just the other day, Ted, and he said the undecideds were leaning toward no. They were moving toward no, but still, you're finding themselves down by 9 points. This is one where I think people they're thinking more in terms of adult responsibility as opposed to what happened in Colorado. How about those ads featuring Wellington Webb? We saw that as well. Bringing the folks from Colorado saying, don't make the mistake we did. It doesn't seem to be swinging folks.
But I still think that's effective for that margin there. That you reach a point where, the 50% I think is the top of what they'll get. Now, whether it's 50 plus 1 to drive it over the top, I mean, that was what happened in 2010 with medical marijuana. It was just, half a point here or there. I think that there's a lot of doubt out there. I still think the thing is going to fail. I think there's going to be a last-minute infusion. Look, they just got $1 million from Discount Tire from the, 37th richest man in the nation, the richest man in Arizona. They got $500,000 from Insys, which is a company that makes opioids and artificial marijuana. That's a lot of money to throw around at the last minute.
Do you think that the no's could catch up to the yeses? And do you think that once people get into, or whether they're home filling out the early ballots or they get to the polling place, they realize, I just can't take that extra step?
I don't. I mean, Prop 205 is pretty complicated. I don't know that we're going to see a lot of voters get super into the weeds. I think people have kind of, yeah, no pun intended, have kind of done, their research on broadly what does it do. I think generally most people's minds are made up on it, and I'm not sure any amount of money against it is really going to move it too much.
Only 8%, Steve, don't know. I think it sounds like people have pretty much made up their minds. But again, when you have to decide, I'm going to allow for small amounts of marijuana to be legal. That's a big step for some folks.
This is also the demographic dynamic we're talking about. We talked about Latino voters a bit. What about the millennial voters that Bernie Sanders and Michelle Obama got excited about? From everything that I've read, it looks like younger voters, potential younger voters, really are leaning toward yes. Are they going to vote? Now, these are not the high efficacy voters yet. These are folks maybe voting for the first or second time.
And again, the last minute ads, I think you're going to see the little pieces of doubt, the questions about candy to children, the questions about will there be money to schools, the questions about DUI. I think people, I worked a campaign years ago and I worked on the no side, and my main aim was to cause people doubt. Because when people go into the voting booth or when they fill out the ballot and they're not sure, they vote no.
Yeah, that's kind of what the point I'm trying to get at is that it's for some folks, especially of a certain age, that's a big step because that has their entire lives. It's either they or their friends or people they know sneaking around doing this and sneaking around anymore.
Well, here's the other interesting thing. Some of the pro ads are talking about people who needed the PTSD and everything else. People with PTSD can get marijuana now, which sort of undermines that whole 205 issue. Now, the argument is, well, yeah, they have to go to a doctor and spend money on a license. But if your concern is people who need it for medical reasons, that's not a reason to vote for 205.
All right, Prop 206 was also mentioned in the poll, and this one also seems to find some support. This one finds even more support than Prop 205, and you got to wonder, where's business out there? I thought the business community was going to just come after this thing like a bull in a china shop, and we're not seeing anything.
No, we are not seeing them at all. These had much bigger margins of support on this. Basically, the pro folks, and this is to raise the minimum wage to $12 by 2020, have put about $1.5 million into this. They're really pushing it. The no folks have put $0. And I talked to the Chamber of Commerce about that today or this week, and they kind of said, you know what, we have a lot of issues to deal with. They're putting their money into 205.
And
they're much more focused on trying to combat Prop 205, dealing with some of the legislative races. This seems to be at the bottom of their priority list.
Are they basically saying that 206, and that's a healthy lead there, that's a difficult lead to get past, are they saying we give up? There's no reason to fight it?
No, they're not saying that, and they're saying they're still fighting it. They're fighting it via social media, they're fighting it via Chamber of Commerce meetings, but they're not putting any money in it.
Those Chamber of Commerce meetings can really turn a lot
They
of
could.
heads.
Well, this is the thing. I think they have given up. Here's the other little piece of the equation. Remember, the Restaurant Association filed suit to knock it off the ballot, spent a bunch of money to try to get it knocked off the ballot, only to find out they filed it a day late. So the Restaurant Association goes to the Chamber and says, look, we've sort of bent our axe on this thing. Come forward. You promised you would. And here's Steve Chukri from the Restaurant Association saying, I hear crickets. And they're not going to spend any more money on this. They figure, look, if the rest of the business community doesn't care, fine, we'll raise our rates. We'll lay off a few people. There'll be 12 people at McDonald's instead of 13.
Does this indicate that much of the business community doesn't really care?
I think they don't care at this moment, thinking the tide is against them, but I think what we might see is by 2020, when the rate, the wage has gone up as much as it will by 2020, then you might see, and I told you so, or look at all the people we had to lay off. So I think right now they're thinking, okay, we'll give people a chance. This sounds fine now, but maybe we'll have to revisit in a few years.
You don't undo this kind of stuff. You don't. I mean, they've been talking about undoing the minimum wage that was passed in 2006. When we were at $5.15 an hour, we went to $6.75. We're at $8.05 now.
Maybe they're happy that it's only going to go to $12 in 2020 as opposed to what some other states are talking about, which is $15 and then some.
Well, exactly, and you've got to measure on the ballot in Flagstaff to do that, and then maybe they're figuring, for some of these folks, the best case scenario is we only get the $12 and Flagstaff doesn't do it to us.
Well, it's bad PR too. I mean, it's hard for an individual business to put money against something that their employees are going to see, the people who are protesting are going to see. I mean, it's hard to get individual companies, even those who oppose it, to put their name on the line for that.
Hey, the poll also talked about the favorability or otherwise of the Arizona state legislature. And you're sitting around here and you hear stuff and you think, oh my goodness, people just can't stand the legislature. The approval rating must be in single digits or something. Steve, people aren't all that upset with the state legislature.
Are these people paying attention?
No.
Is Howie Fisher not getting enough subscriptions? Is the Capital Times? Is the Republic?
Well, look at the bottom of the screen there, Steve. Look under "Don't Know."
Yes, that would be your
That's-
answer.
that's
Don't know the
your key.
legislature exists, or don't know what?
Or have
Yes.
no comment, or
Yes.
don't know
But-
we exist.
Well, I think part of the issue, we've seen this with congressional polls. People like their own lawmakers. They've met their lawmaker. They've called their lawmaker. They've heard from their lawmaker. They get mail from their lawmaker. And so that has sort of spilled over into, well, I don't know about the rest of the folks out there. And that's where that 35% don't know comes in. But in terms of their own lawmakers in general, I think most folks are happy.
This really surprised me. I think with all the conversations we had in the last legislative session about school funding and frustration over that and some big issues, and a lot of people seemed upset with the legislature, and yet then we poll them and 36%, 35% say, I don't really know anything about it.
I think you've hit it. The legislature did in fact put 1, 2, 3 on the ballot, even though they were too chicken to actually do it themselves. Let's do this poll a year from now. If there's no new money, you remember that whole from the governor, well, it's first step. If there's no new money there, I think those numbers look a whole lot different a year from now.
It's hard for me to say this to two people who are at the Capitol every day and to someone who talks about the Capitol all the time. We didn't have a 1060, or 1070 rather. We didn't have other things that might be taking rights away from people. We had, as Howie said, even if it was a punt, we got education funding. I almost feel like this last session was not necessarily the time where people would come out angry if they're paying attention.
All right, last panel here. Again, there you go. This is not the last one. This is the one we were talking about. But maybe this next one kind of coalesces into the last panel. Arizona's job market. How you feel about the job market. And again, it seems as though there's relative optimism out there, which suggests maybe the legislature's not doing such a bad job.
This mirrors, Earl DeBerg has been doing something called a consumer confidence survey now for 20, 30 years. And people are confident, they think things are going to get better as opposed to things are getting worse. I mean, they can see the proverbial light at the end of the tunnel. It's not the oncoming freight. They think wages are finally going to go up. They see, some of it feeds back on itself. Unemployment rate is dropping. There seem to be more jobs out there. There seem to be more classified ads. And I think it makes them feel a little better. And the fact is that the prices have not been going up that much either. So as a whole, I think people are willing to start loosening up. And again, feeding back on itself, when people feel better, they spend more. More retail sales means more jobs.
You buying all this stuff he's saying over here?
It makes sense. I don't know if it's really optimism and more that people are feeling that, okay, things haven't gotten worse, so maybe they'll stay the same for a little while. I think that was a much bigger group in terms of, okay, we had a rough few years, things are kind of stable even though they're really slow, so let's sit here for a little bit and see what happens.
So things aren't the greatest, but it could be worse.
Right.
Well, always look on the bright side of life, as a famous comedy troupe said. But what about, I'm surprised neither of my esteemed colleagues mentioned the business-friendly governor we have. Isn't that the reason this is going on?
Well, let's talk. We have about 30 seconds. You want to talk about the business-friendly governor? I mean,
I think he may take credit for this poll.
Was the ninth floor happy to see these results from the poll?
Oh, I would certainly think so.
What do you think, Howie?
Oh, of course. But of course, this governor's been taking credit for everything. When the unemployment rate goes down, he takes credit. When it goes up, I don't hear from the governor's press.
Well, for those who can't wait for the show to end, we give the governor credit. We've run out of time. Thank you all for being here. Monday, On Arizona Horizon, we'll learn more about massive cyber attacks against major websites, and we'll get reaction to a recent documentary we aired on Saudi Arabian farming in La Paz County. That's Monday, 5:30 and 10 on the next Arizona Horizon. Tuesday, how supercomputers are mapping the human immune system. Wednesday, how Goodwill Industries helps those in need find employment. Thursday, we'll look at issues regarding the fast-approaching election. And Friday, it is another edition of this here Journalists Roundtable. That is it for now. I'm Ted Simons. Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great weekend.
Arizona Horizon is made possible by contributions from the Friends of Arizona PBS, members of your PBS station. Thank you.